Okay, let's try a few more things. Now, one of the things that's conspicuous because of its absence on our webpage is the lack of any images whatsoever. And images really spice up a page, and sometimes they're critical to the page content, and we don't have any. So let's put an image on our webpage. Now, if you go back to your Atom editor, and if I go back to my Atom editor, you'll see that I've actually added an image to the folder where all of my HTML files exist. You can get a copy of that from the course resources, or you can use your own image, it doesn't matter. But this is the one that I'm going to use. And it's a generic company logo I just found on Google. So how am I going to add this image into my page? Well, let's have a look at our page. Right now, I have a heading, I have some text, I have another heading, some more text, a bunch of stuff. I'm going to get rid of all that. And what I'm going to try to build right now is a sample login page that someone might have on a website. And what I want is the logo up here, then a heading that says login or something like that, and then I want to have a place to enter a username, a password, and a button that allows us to log in. So let's go back and clean up our HTML file and start building that, and we'll include an image. So back in my HTML, I'm going to change the title in the title tag to login. Then a little bit further down, I'm just going to delete everything I have here, including that link at the bottom. So in other words, I've emptied all of the content between the starting body tag and the ending body tag. And the very first thing I want to put in here is an image. So how do we do that? Well, as you might guess, it is an HTML tag, and its syntax is pretty straightforward. It starts with a pointy bracket, as all HTML tags do, then IMG, which stands for image. And then I have to tell the web browser where to find that image. So the syntax for that is src equals, followed by, and then the image that I want to load. And as you can see over here on the left, I have samplecompany.jpg. All I did was move that JPEG right into the same folder that has my HTML files. So I'll just type its name. And it is samplecompany.jpg. And I could just do that and stop and save this and go back to my web browser and reload it and see if that image shows up. And it does. There it is. But it's pretty big. Let's make it a little bit smaller. There's some other attributes we can add to an image tag, and one of them is width. So let's make the width, let's make it 200. Now that 200 stands for pixels wide. And on a standard computer screen, there are 72 pixels to the inch. So I've given it a width. Let's save that, go back, reload it, and see what happens. It actually made it smaller, and that looks pretty good. That works for me right now. Great, so I have that. Now I want to go to the next line, and I want to put a heading in. So I'll put H1, log in, H1. Save that, go back, reload, and see what it looks like. It's good enough for right now. We can clean it up a little bit more later. So we have a login title, we have an image. Now let's build a form. Now you've never built a form yet, and a form, of course, is a place where users can enter information onto a web page, and we use them every day. But how do they exist? Well, we're just going to go through the very basics right now because we don't actually have a means of doing anything with that form data just yet. But let's see how we can build it. A form begins with a form tag, an opening form tag, and it ends with a closing form tag. And in between, I can put things. So when you want to enter information into a form, what you're actually doing is inputting information into a form. And there are different kinds of inputs. So let's try a few of them. We'll just do just the inputs right now. We'll worry about making it look good in a few minutes. So I'm going to put a place for a user to type his or her name or username. So input is the tag. Type, and the type of input I'm using right now is text. It's just a place for people to type things. And I need to give this input a name. And it'll become apparent why we have to have names when we get a little bit further on. But for right now, just realize that inputs have to have an attribute of name. Name equals, and I'll call this username. Great. Let's save that, go back, reload our web page, and see what it looks like. And there I have a little place where I can type stuff in. I can't do anything with it yet, but at least I can type it in. All right, so we wanted a username. We also want a place for people to type passwords. So input type equals password, and its name will be password. Save that. Let's see what this looks like. Well, there are my two inputs. The first one is where I can type my name, and the second one is where I can type a password. And the big difference, of course, is that you can't see what's typed in a password field. Well, that's pretty good, but we still don't have a means of submitting this. Well, turns out there's a means of entering a submit button as well. And it is, as you might expect, input type equals submit. Save that. Reload the web page, and there I have a place where I can type my username, a place where I can type my password, and a submit button. Now, if I click that right now, what do you think is going to happen? I haven't actually told this form what it should do. It doesn't have an action associated with it. Well, if I click it, watch up here. It says index.html at the end of my URL, but when I click submit, it actually changes to question mark username equals A, which is what I had typed in here, and password equals A, which is what I had typed in here. So it actually did do something. It took the information we put in our form and it populated it into a GET request, which is what the question mark means. It's a GET request, and it posted it there. Now let's go back and try something else. You notice one of the things that I've entered on this form is a password. And passwords are supposed to be secure. You're not supposed to be able to see them when you type them in. They're supposed to be hidden from the end user. But back in my web browser, when I submitted this form, it put all of the form data right up here in the URL. Well, let's go back to our editor and see if we can change that. What I'm going to do is change this form tag to say method equals, right now, because we didn't put anything, it had get. It uses the get method where everything's posted right as part of the URL. But if I change that to post, go back, and then just clear all this stuff out at the end, and make sure I have the latest version of the web page. And now I type in my name and a password, and I click submit. It appears that nothing happened. The form just went empty. But what actually happened was, we sent the information, when we clicked the submit button, we sent it using the post method, which is a method that is really common for posting form information. There are situations where using a get is perfectly acceptable and in fact is absolutely necessary, but normally when we're posting form information, we want it to show up as a post and not as a get. Now the one thing that's missing here right now in this form is it's all on one line and I have no clue what I should be typing into these boxes. Well, there's a couple of ways of addressing that. If I wanted this form to appear in a horizontal line, I might not want to put labels outside of the form elements. I can go back and change it by adding a couple of attributes to our fields. So in the first one, which is my input type equals text, name equals username, I could put placeholder equals username. Now just save that, go back to your web browser and reload it. Oops, it's trying to post it, but sure, let's just post it anyway. You notice how it put the name username in there. Now when I start typing in that goes away. But it gives me some indication as to what I should be typing in here. In the same way, if I come down to password and put placeholder equals password, oops, better spell it right. Save that, go back to my web browser and reload it, and I'll say sure, post that data again. Now it puts a placeholder in for password. And when I start to type in the password field, that placeholder goes away. Well, that's one approach, and it's usually good practice to do that sort of thing, to give users some indication as to what they should be typing in there. But what I really want is not this. I don't want my form to be all in one line. I want it to be with a text indication here, and then my input, and then a text label here, and then my input. And then below it all, I want my submit button. Now, how might I do that? Well, I'm going to show you a really bad way to do it because it's giving me an opportunity to introduce tables to you, and it's also giving me an opportunity to show you why it's not a good idea to use tables to position output on the screen. People did it for years. It's the way it was initially done when web designers started building web pages. Everyone used tables to hold all of the content. Well, we're not going to. So what I'm going to do right now is just take these inputs and cut them and paste them outside my form, because I'm going to use them in a minute. And inside of the form tags, I'm going to construct a table. And a table begins with the HTML tag table, not surprisingly. And I'm going to type my closing table just so I don't forget to. And then in between those, I'm going to put a table row, one row of table cells. And a table row has a tag that says TR. And I'll close my TR tag. And inside of that TR, that table row, I'm going to put two cells. The one on the left will hold my label for the form element, and the one on the right will hold the form element itself. So a table cell is not, you might think it's TC, but it's not. It's actually TD for table data. Close that TD tag, and then I'll create another one, TD, and close that TD tag. So I've now created a table with one row, but I want two rows. So I'll copy this entire row and paste it below. Now I have a table with two rows. Now if I save that and I go back to my web browser and reload the page, nothing appears to have changed. And that makes perfect sense. It got a little bit wider here. Although you may not see it, although you don't see it, between this H1 tag and between these form elements, I have a table with two rows and nothing in those rows. Let's go back there and put some information in these table cells. So in the first row, I'll type, and I'm going to make this deliberately long so I can illustrate something to you in a minute. Please enter your full username in the box to the right. I better spell that right. Now that's deliberately long, just so I can illustrate something in a minute. And in the cell beside it, on the same row, I'll go down here and cut my input type equals text, and I will paste it in that cell. Okay, let's save that. Go back and see what our table looks like now. So I reload this, and there is my full label, and there's a place to type it in. That's what I want. Okay, let's go do our second row. Back to the Atom editor, and this time I'll just put enter your password as the label, and I will take this password field and I'll highlight it, this row, cut it, and paste it where it belongs. All right, let's save that, go back to our web browser, reload the page, and that looks about right. Now that's good. I have a place to enter my username, I have a place to enter my password, and I have a submit button. And that's perfectly acceptable. Now the reason I gave you so much text here is to demonstrate why it's not a good idea to use tables to lay things out. Users, by and large, will often access a website using a variety of different devices. Right now I'm accessing it using a computer, and you probably are too. But other people will come to the site on a tablet or on a phone, and when that happens, the available screen real estate gets considerably smaller. Watch what happens as I shrink this down. Notice how that becomes pretty less than attractive. This line, because it has too much text, actually breaks into two, and it just doesn't look good. And although this is a very simplistic example, if you use a table to hold all of the elements of your web page, to arrange them where you want them to be, it's going to look bad over time. Okay, so we're not going to do that. But that was sufficient to illustrate how we're going to build our tables initially, or build our sites initially, and it actually gives you exposure to the table, which we'll be seeing quite regularly as this course goes on. So that's how we're going to build a simple form. Now we can make this look a little bit better if we want to. We can come down here and say, well, maybe I should have a couple of blank lines before this input type equals a submit. So I'll put a couple of BR tags there. And maybe I don't want the button to say submit. I'll give it another attribute, value equals log in. So when I go back and reload the page now, you'll see that we actually have a button that now says login, and it's visually separated from the rest of the form elements. Maybe two more changes. Maybe I'll come in here and after those BRs, I'll put a horizontal line, HR, and maybe after the title, I'll put a horizontal line, HR, which actually stands for horizontal rule. It's one of those HTML tags that does not require a closing tag. Now I come back here and reload this, and yeah, that looks a little bit better. Again, this is purely for illustrative purposes. Right now, we're not at all concerned with making things look good. We were going to become concerned with making things look good before too long, but for the moment, This is enough to get us going along. So let's next think about how we're going to start making it look good. And that's going to bring us to cascading style sheets. All right, that's where we'll pick up next time.